rise one day at a time. Kimmy Kim and Elations Radio. They're here to get your day going fine. Kimmy Kim and Elations Radio. Kimmy Kim and Elations Radio. Kimmy Kim and Elations Radio. And here's your host, Miss Kim Robinson.
All right. Happy Saturday, and thank you for joining Next Level with Trenace. I am so happy that you are spending 60 minutes, give or take, of your 1,440 minutes of this Saturday afternoon with me. Today's guest is my sister friend, international mindset maven, Sheila Bryan. Sheila, thank you for joining us today.
Great evening, Sister Trenace. Thank you so much for having me. It's so much of a pleasure being on the call with you today to share some time and some wisdom It is an absolute privilege. Thank you for having me.
I've been so excited knowing that you were going to come and share some super gems with all of my listeners. I know that they are going to pick up some great gems and hopefully use them. Could you share with some of my listeners a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. As you stated, my name is Shayla Bryan, and I have been in this country, in the United States, for about 20 years. And I was born and raised in South America in the country of Colombia. And I can tell you that as I migrated to the U.S., my life began, I came here for the American dream. And I could tell you the first 7 years of my life, I experienced what you call the American nightmare. But, glory to God for always covering me. I had my share of experiences, and every experience has taught me a lesson. It has awakened me to my gifts and my abilities, my potential. I wear many hats today after 20 years of being in this country. I wear a hat of a mother, a coach, a licensed life coach. I am an influencer. I am also considered a mentor and a mindset maven in the marketplace. So my company, which is what I have, an organization that's called the Empowerment Academy for Women, where our vision is to help women walk boldly, courageous, and also take action to live life on their terms, which we know that it is very, very important that as women we continue to encourage and empower each other to live our lives based on the gifts and the abilities that we all individually possess. So that's my vision overall, and that's what I love to do.
Great. So, because you aren't called the Mindset Maven for nothing. What started your journey to blossom into the Mindset Maven?
Very good question. When I came to this country in 1999, I was 17 years old. I was a young girl in a foreign land. I remember coming with my father and him telling me, of course, we're here on vacation, and we had like a 3-month stay, and it was time to go back home, and my father looked at me and said, "Are you ready to go?" And I said, "No, I want to stay in America." He looked at me in awe and in shock because his first words were, "We have no family in this country. We don't have family in the U.S." And I said, "Dad, you have raised me. I was also raised by phenomenal, strong women like my great-grandmother, and my grandmother. And I remember just everything that I was raised with, all the principles and the teachings and the wisdom that was with me as I was, growing up. So I told my father I would stay, not knowing what would happen, not knowing what would be of my life. So I went through my first 6 years of abuse. Almost 7 years, my first 7 years in America, I experienced domestic violence. I was married to a man who abused me on every level. And from that marriage, I had 3 children, collective with my husband at the time. And after 7 years of being in that marriage, I left the marriage, went through some hardships as a single mom, homelessness, went through an experience, being in shelters, not knowing how I will feed my children. I mean, I went through some of the hardest and most darkest times that someone that is, unprepared. I don't think any one of us is prepared for hardships, but this difference is when you have family, you have resources to lean on, but I had to figure it out. I had to always think and strategize and figure it out, what to do, how to do it, how to make a way for myself and my children. So I kept always a strong mind. I'm not going to lie. There were times that I went through a dark period and perhaps experienced depression, but I can tell you that I always found a way to talk myself out of those dark moments and dark days. I know that it was always going to be a way. If you can look up, you can get up. My mindset was like, I cannot, just looking at my children alone, I cannot give up. I cannot surrender to my circumstances. So my mind has always been a made-up type of a woman with a made-up mind. So over the years, once I once I got out of those hardships and those days of my life got better, I began to start coaching and teaching and just being in the marketplace, what you would call a maven. I started to talk about the experiences that I had and how I overcame them. Not even thinking that I was coaching women. I just thought I was sharing my story. And over the years, the more I share my story, the more women begin to connect and be attracted to me. And little by little. And that's how, year by year, I began to go to conferences and events and connect with really powerful women. And I believe over a couple of years ago, one of my leaders, my mentors, she said, there's something about you and the way that you are and how you approach hardships and how you approach circumstances. So you have such a powerful thought process and mindset. She gave me that name. She said the mindset maven. And I literally took on that mantle because I understood that it is really the mind. It is really the mind that we all have to conquer our own minds in order to be able to get through difficulties and challenges in life. So I can tell you that it is everything that I've ever been through and I have conquered and overcome that has allowed me to become what you mentioned is the mindset maven.
Thank you for being so transparent with what you went through, the struggles you went through to get to blossom into who you are, because that was already something within you, and that's something that we all should understand. It's all within us. It's just us making the decision or turning that switch on to move forward, take action. What do you think was your take action moment or moments that happened to you?
Good question. There were situations that I would say that particularly, give an example, that I knew that there was a way. When I ended up getting in my divorce, I was in a shelter for about 90 days with my 3 young children at the time. And going through counseling and therapy every single, 3 or 4 times of the week, every single week, I remember just hearing different stories from different women who experienced the same, and I had a phenomenal counselor. I thank God for that woman who sat in the center of that room and looked at us with no judgment, but all compassion. And she always spoke of hope. She always talked about the possibilities and the opportunity, and she always spoke words of vision. She always said, if you can just imagine what life will look like once you get out of this place, just start to think, imagine your life, vision your life. And that awakened something within me. So I always knew that there has to be a way. When there's a will, there's a way. And there's a God at the end of the day. I'm a true believer. I'm a faithful woman. I believe, that God never gives us more than we can handle. So every situation that I've experienced, I've always been grateful that God will align me with people who would speak hope, who would give me wisdom, who would share, resources with me. So, that's how I know God always shows up in every situation, because there is always a way, because we have a will. He gives us a will. We just have to be open and hopeful and faithful that when we are presented with opportunities to move forward and to do better, that we are in a place that we can see those opportunities to move forward.
Wow. That's all I have for that. Man, that's so awe-inspiring just to know that when you got knocked down, your thought was, only if I can look up, I can get up. And then you kept fighting, you kept swinging, and you just didn't give up, and your mind was laser focused on God. And the thing about that is, it's so important for us. We want things in our human form, but the Bible speaks that when we do the work of God first, that everything that we want will be added to it. So what do you think that God added to your life based on your commitment to Him?
Oh, man, I just love that question. When I tell you, God always added strength. That was the most important element that I can tell you, that every time I was in that dark place, every time that I was in the pitfall, I can remember like the story, Paul said that, he had this thorn in his flesh, and this thorn in his flesh was the affliction, it was the suffering, it was just all of the strife, everything that he had to go through, to be reminded that there's a God who has enough grace, that his grace is sufficient. So I remember having, to always lean on God, to just sit in a quiet place and know that he will always add strength to me, because I'm weak. I can't do it. I can't lean on people. People disappointed me. People didn't come through on their word. But when I lean on God and I lean on the word, and I always say to him that, just lead me, just guide me. I'll always seek for, as you stated, just seek for the kingdom. Just ask God to lead you, and he will certainly open the doors. So strength was one of the big things that God added to my life, and then he added the resources. I was always open-minded. I was always open and humble, which is another, characteristics about me. I'm very humble. I've never been the type of woman who cannot open my mouth and ask for help. I've always asked for help, because, Scripture tells us that you have not, for you ask not. And then I took that very much to heart. I mean, I love the word, because this is something that I do. All of my life I've been raised to take the word as my first daily source of encouragement, but the spiritual nourishment. So my life has always been based on, when I have a hardship, when I'm going through a struggle, when I'm going into a setback, and I have to sit down. In order to have my breakthrough, I need to assess the breakdown, sit down and take inventory. And when that inventory, and I take, step by step what happened and how did I get here. Let me tell you, when I'm in that breakdown moment, I have my breakthrough when I literally just give it all to God and just take on his yoke and just go through even things that he asked me to do, and I don't want to do it, I still obediently do it. And sure enough, I get a breakthrough after breakthrough. So I can say that leaning on God, leaning on the word, it's been one of the greatest things that God has added to me.
So what do you think, because your keywords are open, and you and I, we've become new sister friends, and I love you, like your energy, like right away. You are teaching me, and I'm older, but you are teaching me through your actions on how you activate different things. How do you think that your openness allows for you to move through the world and even through the industry and in your personal life? How do you think that openness helps?
My openness was something that I had to learn and become aware of. Because there was times where, and I'm sure every woman who has experienced trauma and crisis, and I want to be able to talk to those women, to those listeners, about openness. It's very important to understand that you have to release and you have to forgive. That's how my openness came. I had to become a woman that forgave, not because I wanted to accept everything that was ever done wrong to me, but because I had to release those burdens, because I had to release those negative thoughts and those limiting beliefs and those guilt. And once I did that, I began to now receive. I understood. I had to take time to understand as well that, pain is really our teacher. Crisis, trauma, hardships are truly our teachers. When I speak to women that are survivors of domestic violence, I always help them change the narrative by saying that you are not a victim if you are here to tell your story. You are a survivor because the victim never lived to tell their story. So being open is simply being able to be forgiven, to be able to allow things to happen, and in the midst of things happening, to remain grateful. Because through gratitude, I have been able to see food on the table for my children. I have been able to see my bills get paid. I have been able to see the things that God can do in my life because I have remained completely open to forgive, to love, to accept, to understand and to ultimately not take anything for granted.
This is Domestic Violence Month, the entire month, and it makes me sad that we have to have a month to remind us of this horrible occurrence. Even now with this pandemic, people are locked in the house with their mates more than they were before. Children are locked in the house with their abusers more than they were before. What do you think are some things or some mindset that you can maybe share with the listeners when it comes to a perspective of, I'm here, what do I do next, or how should I plan to escape?
Oh, great question. And I'm speaking from personal experience. I can tell you one of the most dangerous things is to not speak up. You know, I've done a lot of teachings and conferences, and I've done events particularly geared to domestic violence. And you're correct. I want to definitely piggyback on the sadness and how ludicrous it is that we're taking just October of every 360 plus days to say, hey, I want to bring awareness to what's happening every day in the lives of many people that we know, love, care, you know, next door neighbors. Just recently, a young man was shot and killed in Texas because he was breaking up a domestic violence fight. You know, this man was abusing his girlfriend, and he intervened and eventually lost his life. And this just happened last weekend. So what I want to do is very much clarify the importance of being able to speak up. What many people don't understand, and this is rightfully so for people who have never endured domestic abuse, is no one wants to be beat up. Nobody wants to be abused. Children don't want that. You know, men don't want that. Women don't want that. But what happens is this begins it begins with a grooming process. You know, the abuser is not always the abuser. I've always taught people that you have to look from perspective that my abuser was not always my abuser. He was some days a loving husband and a very protective and providing father. So to the people on the outside looking in, I want to speak to those people first, is that you have to be able to approach the situation and look at the big picture, that people are people, human beings. There are flaws within human beings. There's trauma. There's crisis. There are some form of abuse as well that the abuser usually has experienced. The victim or the survivor or the woman who's currently in that relationship that is toxic and unhealthy and abusive sometimes comes from a space of, you know, lack of belief in self, lack of confidence in self. Shame is also things that have kept women and keep women in these relationships. So the first step that I've always encouraged and asked women to look at for themselves is, how much do you want to live? I mean, how important is your life? And do you value your life? Because that's the very first thing you need to look at. Not if he's going to jail, not if he's, you know, if you're going to break up with him. I mean, women, and I speak from personal experience, women look at again, the mate, from the mate's perspective, the husband as an individual that they love, that they care about. We just don't like the abuse. We might like the partner, the spouse. We just don't like the abuse in the relationship. But to answer your question very quickly, the first thing I always say is to look at your life and ask yourself this question: do you want to live? Because if you do, I guarantee you there is help and there's a way. There's truly a way out.
That is good. On my Tuesday night show, we talked a little bit about that, and I think that currently in society, we are more of a mind your business type society. We don't look out for our neighbor. We don't consider what our neighbor may be doing or going through. We don't even acknowledge that we have a neighbor many times, and sometimes that abuser has gotten that person away from their family, away from their friends, has made them ashamed and has embarrassed them at the level where if they seek help, they don't have anywhere to go. So what would you say to the person who feels like they don't have anywhere to go, or what would you say to the person who knows that the person that she loves or he loves is being hurt by someone, and they want to let them know that I'm here, because they're not. But I don't think that they're going to leave right away. But just knowing that there's somebody available that they can help them, I think that that's important for them to know.
You're correct. I completely agree. It is always, for the women who are currently in the abusive relationship, it is the first thought to think, there's shame. What is my family going to think? Or, people will say, I want to be in this relationship, that I want to go through this, and that's not necessarily the case. But the very key thing to exit strategies is that planning. You have to be able to plan. There are going to be, if not every woman will be able to have the same exit strategies, because not every woman has the same available resources. I know for me, in my home state of Florida right now, when I was going through my abuse and I was planning, because it took me 7 months to get out of that. It wasn't an overnight thing. It was, it was a final straw. My husband almost took my life, and it was the domestic violence unit in the local police department that, I showed up there with my 3 children. I remember grabbing my kids, and I just showed up to the police department, and I was there. It was, bruises, and I was battered. And I literally pleaded with the lady, and I said, I cannot go back, because I would not live. I would not make it tomorrow. My children will be without a mother. So there's first having to release the shame of what people will think, because you have to be able to rescue yourself. Unfortunately, I can tell you this, it's just very, very sad, but a lot of women may not have the strength, or don't have the will, or just don't have the courage to rescue themselves. So first, I want to be able to make sure that women understand, or men understand, that it is important. It is important to look at your life and understand that you are the savior of your life. And there are resources. The local police department nowadays, before, we're talking back in the early 2000s, back in 2006 to 7 was my divorce. However, back then, there wasn't that much information accessible like there is now. You have the domestic violence hotline, you have social media, you have a lot of ministries and organizations that are geared towards, and specifically this month, where it's on high alert. Specifically this month is probably the best month to begin to plan an exit strategy by making first a phone call anonymously to the domestic hotline. And also, you think about domestic violence from a perspective of just physical abuse, but domestic violence is just such a bigger, broader spectrum of reality for other people. So I want to be able to give this concept to everyone who's going through not just physical, but emotional, sexual, financial, spiritual, relationship abuse. There are people who are going through relationship abuse, but are not necessarily being physically hurt. Men and women. I've counseled men and women who their spouses never hit them, but however, that you're saying, isolate them from loved ones, isolate them from jobs, does not give them the freedom, or constantly threats them verbally, and it kills their confidence. It takes away and robs them from their own ability to rescue themselves. So this is an internal process. You have to be willing to strategize and take the steps necessary.
So through social media, a lot of random women do inbox me about their abuse. I've not been in that type of situation, but I have many, many friends that have been in that situation. My dear, dear friend, I'm not going to say her name, she has a book out about her experience, but I never considered after a person escapes that trauma that they have wear and tear on their body, because that can happen. I never really actually thought about it until she and I talk, and she talk about different health issues she is having, or she is trying to move past, because she was in a domestic marriage for, I think, like 10 years. And that's something that we don't even consider. I know I didn't consider it, and she just has so many health issues. She has so many things that she's working through on a daily basis in her mind, even though she has a new marriage, and their new marriage has probably been about 10 years. There's just so much stuff that you have to go through, and then you're still ashamed to come back and talk to your family and friends about it. She and I were friends in high school, but we only knew each other. We weren't close. But when I shared that not only should women teach their sons to keep their hands to themselves, but it's important for you to tell your daughter to keep her hands to herself. Just because a boy or a man should not hit her back, that doesn't mean that she should hit. And at that point was when she messaged me about her experience, because she said she appreciated the fact that I said that part. I've always taught my sons to not hit. But when are we as women going to teach our daughters not to be the aggressor as well? Because it's got to be embarrassing for a man to say that I'm in an abusive situation, mentally, physically, emotionally, all of that, because he can experience the same thing.
That's correct. Very good point, Trenace. I can tell you from, again, being a parent, I have 4 children, and my children are teenagers, 18, 16, 14, and my youngest being a 8-year-old. I've had these conversations every single year. Every year as they get older, we have, more mature and progressive conversations about reality. And you are correct. Let me tell you, I want to say that even though I had many physical, abuse, I experienced my husband. I don't even want to get into the details of the abuse, but I could tell you that even though physically he had done everything possible to my body, emotionally and spiritually, that's where I was most broken. So for many women who perhaps have had physical damage, some women have had gunshot wounds. I know for me, when I was in the women's shelter back in those days, I remember having to sit among women who were stabbed. Some women were shot in the face. Some were shot in the throat. Some had, their arms or their legs severely damaged because they got run over by a car by their mate. Let me tell you, women went through a lot of things as well. What takes the hardest is to get through the emotional, overcoming it emotionally. That's the work that has to be a lifetime thing. You just don't go through church, and you just don't just talk to a friend. Having to work on yourself emotionally, because there's something called triggers that happen. So all those physical scars and physical damage and hurt, for some may be scars that are visible. For some, like mine, I don't have that many physical scars to my body, although I have some, particularly my head, where he cracked my head literally wide open, pregnant, refused to take me to the hospital. I have a lifetime permanent scar in my hair. And for me, it has been, besides therapy and counseling, it has been a self-work every day. I don't go a day without, talking to myself and affirming myself and having the conversations and being honest with myself when I'm having the triggers, going into relationships or just out in the world as a single woman and dating. There are conversations that I'll have with a man that is an instant trigger, and I wouldn't even pursue or continue the conversations. And having children now at the age where they're potentially dating and they're liking somebody, I have a 14-year-old son that I constantly tell him, because he has his sisters at home, he may raise his voice, and I'll look at him and I'll have the conversation with him. I say, well, you are training your sisters on how to interact with the opposite sex and vice versa. I would have a very honest conversation with my daughters, and I would tell them how you treat your brother. This is the charity begins at home, says the word. So charity is not just serving. Charity is relationship. Charity is, communion, it's fellowship and breaking bread. So if you don't understand the process of doing that at home, then you're going to go out in the world as an adult becoming someone who's very negative, toxic, and potentially abusive. So it is important that we know from mothers who are raising children in abusive and unhealthy and dysfunctional relationships. Many moms and many people don't have those conversations, when their children get of age, because they don't want to talk about it. It becomes cliche. And we know this is happening for many, many decades. This is generation after generation. It's like a curse, The dysfunction continues to become a cycle, from, 2 or 3 generations before. So having those conversations, it is very, very critical. But first having to acknowledge it, as a woman, as a mother, you have to acknowledge it first. Otherwise, the children would not know, that they're dysfunctional, that they're having, tendencies. These are all tendencies that come full-blown behaviors over time.
Yeah, definitely. I think that there is there's so many things that are taboo or we don't want to discuss. We're so ashamed of. But who else should our children learn from except from us? We should be the source when it comes to educating them on domestic abuse and sex and different things in life, and we should be the go-to person. They shouldn't have to experience life through Netflix. They shouldn't have to experience life through their conversations with their peers, peers in the school and their peers in the neighborhood. We should be their first resource. And fine if you're going to be ashamed of it. It's okay because you're human. I think what makes the best parents are somebody, a parent is vulnerable and honest and empathetic and understanding and will share with their child, yeah, I've been through this, so I have a little bit of understanding of what you're going through. Yeah, I did that because, unfortunately, I think our kids see us as perfect. And as my daughter says, Mommy, you just a goody-goody. But no, we weren't goody goodies. We did stuff when we were young, and I think when we share our life experience with our children, that gives them a better understanding of life, and what they're going through is not just something that's happening to them. It happens to many of us during this journey of life, and it just maybe at different times.
Mhm. It is. I mean, we don't repeat cycles that we don't repeat cycles that we break. I'm a firm believer of that. I can tell you that I broke a cycle going back to my mother. My great grandmother and my grandmother, they were also survivors of domestic abuse. So me being the 4th generation, granted, my great grandmother and my grandmother both were going through those experiences as, wives, going through abuse at the house. And my mother being raised in that environment, she also she was exposed to that. My father today, the man that I've become to adore and love, I forgave my father for a lot of the things he did. So I want to take it back a little bit to give you an understanding of why it's important that we understand our children will see our behavior and they'll repeat it unless we break it. But my father was abusive to my mother. When I was a young girl, when I was 2 and 3 and 4 years old, my father and my mother had their own issues and differences, and obviously was dysfunctional and toxic. However, I was taken out of that environment at the age of 5, so I was no longer part of the domestic dysfunctional between my mother and my father, but I was still somewhat exposed to it at my grandparents' home. My mother her life was taken. My mom was murdered by the husband that she married after my father. So this is what you call a repetitive cycle, because she was in a marriage that was unhealthy and toxic in my country, in Colombia. She comes to the United States. She gets married to an American man, and he ends up taking her life, right? So I come to the United States. I come to create a life here. I get married to an American man who abuses me for close to 7 years. But I got out of that relationship. I got out of that marriage, and I am here today. So I am teaching my daughters the triggers, the signs. I'm teaching my daughters self-love, self-respect. I'm teaching my daughters everything that wasn't really taught to me. Because when I wasn't was exposed to the dysfunction. So a lot of things that I was young. I was 18, 19 when I got married, Trenace. So I didn't understand a lot of the signs and the triggers, but I could have identified an abuse in my husband long before I married him. So outside of having the realistic conversations with our children, we have to be able to share with them what we did not learn, what we did not see, what we overlooked, the signs that turns into sirens, you know. So one of the key things that I do now today to be able to help women and teenagers or people who come to me, just like you, I get random inbox messages from women who say to me, I am suffering, I'm unhappy, my husband is doing this, or even the man that I have also been able to counsel to help them keep going, even though it's not physical, it's emotional, and that's spiritually damaging because people become suicidal. They get depressed, men or women. They get depressed by being suppressed by a partner, someone that they have given themselves to. So there's tendencies that we all have when it comes down to being dysfunctional because it comes from our childhood. There are triggers that we all have because they come from past traumas, and it comes from, you know, just being exposed. And then for some of us, something we have lived, right? So here's something that I want to leave. I want to leave this one key thing that is very important, that when we personally as individuals, particularly as women, when we don't take the time to work on our own trauma and our crisis, we teaching that inadvertently to our daughters or maybe our sons. So it's important to understand and know our triggers, what it is that helps us, what triggers us, know what they are, know how to cope with them, and then also teach those same basic principles of coping skills and mechanisms to our daughters, because otherwise we're repeating cycles, if that makes any sense.
So what are the signals that maybe a person who is not in a relationship that's experiencing domestic abuse, what could be some of the things that he or she might need to should look for or could see as somebody that they love in this or is in this type of relationship?
Oh, that's a great question. Signs. Many signs that are so, so natural, so normal that most of us overlook. I would say a universal signs. I don't want to just pin this on a man or pin this on a woman, because women also tend to be very much abusers. And statistically, I remember listening to a professor recently talk about men are highly more susceptible to being abused by women than women are by men. But the reality is that we live in a society that obviously is a feminist society. It's like everything is about the women, the Me Too movement, and all of the, the women who have influence and platforms who come out and speak about their own experiences, and that creates this sense of community for women. But men sometimes get isolated because they are men and they're not taught to verbally speak up, or they find that, being a man is a weakness. So I want to say that the signs are typically people who've been involved with a relationship with someone that tells you a lot of times what they don't like about, your dressing or your hair. Like, they just want to change you, and they change you by simply telling you, I don't like to. I mean, if you've met someone, dressing in mismatching colors, then you accept that person in mismatching colors. As I've seen cases where a person becomes abusive when it comes to the finances. A person who says that they like to control their own money, right? The way that they conversate, the key words that they constantly use. I like my independence. I like to control. Or you have, signs of abusers with people who 9 times out of 10 have had all relationships in their past, and you ask them about what has happened in the past, they always become the victim of everything that has happened to them. Unwillingness to be straightforward with where they feel wrong in their own relationship. I mean, these are very simple signs that most people wouldn't even think someone can become abusive or controlling down the road. And I'm telling you, because this is something that I picked up every time I was involved with someone. I was able to see the signs very quickly, at least within a 90-day period. It didn't take that long, but on the average 90 days was where you start to see the exposure. So you have controlling of money, the person who tells you that they don't like your dressing or your hairdo, constantly tells you they're suggesting what they think you should do, sometimes uninvited suggestions, right? Most of the time wants to always do things without friends, right? That's a big one for me. A partner, that tells you, I don't like your friends, or I don't like your family member, or I prefer that we always do on our own. So that's isolating, premeditating isolation. You have signs of people of abuse, abusive partners who have tendencies to be very negative and vocal, very rude, insensitive, that have no patience, no tolerance. Signs of an abuser as well is an abuser, someone who, especially when you have children, is a man or a woman who may feel like they want to quickly discipline your children, quickly be authoritative in your child's life without giving the time to truly get to know that child. That may speak negative of the people around you. I've had a situation in the past with a young lady who I taught her to, as she was dating a young man, she said that every time they went on a date, he did not allow her to even chip in, like tip or anything like that. And she told me over a period of time she began to recognize that he was very controlling, because he would, 3 or 4 dates down the road, he would tell her what to wear, and he would never allow her to pay. I understand that men want to always be, chivalry is beautiful, and we like it as women. But when a man does not allow you to be a contributor, to be a helper, it is a clear indicator that he will want to control the money, and he will want to control everything else in the relationship.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah.
So,
and it's simple things. I mean, most women don't think about these things.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't have thought about it either. And it doesn't have a face. It doesn't have a way that it looks, because it could be anyone. It could be anyone.
Yeah. Absolutely. It's just small changes. You have to start adapting to this person's liking, and it's over a period of time. I mean, most of the women and men who end up in abusive relationships don't recognize they're in an abusive relationship until, in some cases, it's too late. For some, they end up being married with the person. For some, they move out of state, they move out of town with their individual partners, and are isolated from loved ones. I mean, so you and then sometimes it's just the beat down of that person's confidence. That's something else that happened. And I'm going to chime in this one little thing that happened as well, because even though I had no family in this country when I was married to the man who was abusing me, his family were always around. He had abused me a couple of times. My husband had hit me around his mother, his family. They never did anything. They sheltered the situation, like they turned a blind eye. Something you mentioned earlier, that we live in a society that is like, oh, that's none of my business, so I have nothing to say about it. But even this individual's own family thought it was okay, or perhaps because they didn't want to see him go to jail, because they didn't want to, have him pay the price to what he was doing to me. They covered it up. A lot of times they literally just moved me away, just took me to another relative's home for maybe a week or two. So they took care of me and the children at the time. And, once or twice he did go to jail. He served some time. But eventually I had to start piling up evidence. At one point I knew I needed to get out. I had to keep compiling evidence. Every time he hit me, I had pictures. When there was cops call, I had reports of it, and it was in the system as well, the 911 system. So there was a period of time where I had to really take the time to put together evidence to go to court and to go before a judge and get a long enough extended restraining order and to get custody of my children. So I had to make that decision for myself, Trenace. I think that this is important too, that whenever listen, people don't change or don't get out of a hurtful situation or a bad situation until they've had enough. Because even at the lowest of my lowest, I had enough. For me, enough was enough. And I said, this is the day. And when I made that decision, there was enough strength and courage in my body to get out and get out alive. So there are many, many women who do get out. They get out with scars. They get out with, injuries. They get out. And there are many women who don't, and they become and end up statistics. So I want to share that it's very, very important that we continue to emphasize to the women and the men who are in these abusive relationships and these continuous toxic and unhealthy dysfunctional relationships that if it's to be, it's up to you. It's up to me. And that's the only way that there'll be change.
Now, we are coming to the end. We still have a few more minutes to go. What does Sheila's next level look like?
Great question. My next level is to continue to work to a greater capacity on what God has called me to do. 2020 has been an up and down year. It has been a year for many, many people. Everyone has their own way of describing 2020, but for me, it's the year that defined the next level. I began to minister on an international level as well. For years, I've always done work in the U.S., and 2020 opened up, the floodgates to minister and to virtually work with women across the globe who also speak Spanish. And my next level is releasing my book. My next level is creating a healthy place for women to be able to become bold, to be courageous, to take action and to tell their stories, to break boundaries, to be able to be pillars of change, agents of change as well. And I'm excited for that next level because I see it. It's so clear to me. God has showed me what my next level looks like, and it's starting to manifest. So I'm so excited for that next level.
What are 3 things you want for the listeners to take away if they didn't hear anything else? And we didn't even get to talk about what I actually wanted to talk about, but domestic violence. I know so many people that has impacted that when that came up, it was just like we just had to go there because it's happening every day, not just the month of October. It's happening every day, and probably even more so with this pandemic.
Yes. Yes. So you're asking what would be 3 things that I would want to share, and so for the listeners, well, the number one thing that I want to share and leave your listeners as well is that they have to take time to truly assess yourself. That's the number one thing. You have to be able to assess who you are as a person. I know that God created us image and likeness, but he also created us as a unique individual. No one has my fingerprints, and Trenace, no one has your fingerprint either. So there's no one like you. There's no one like me on this planet. So the very first thing is to take inventory, to assess who you are and whose you are, and build upon that identity. And the second thing that I want to be able to leave is that you need fellowship, you need community. You got to be able to create. I know for me it was very important to create a circle of people. I had no friends in America. I had no family in America. I created those relationships. I extended myself in humility to people who wanted to be in my life, who wanted to spend support, who wanted to be a part of what I was doing, and vice versa. I wanted to be a part of the life and the group of people who were doing great things and serving their communities. So that's the second thing I want to leave, is to create a community and fellowship with people who are servants, who are lovers of people and of God. And the number 3 thing is to be an agent of change, is to go out and do the work, go out and give back, go out and be someone that other people will say, I thank God we crossed paths. Because of you, my mind has shifted. Because of you, my life has changed. Because of you, I now am someone who other people can look up to. So those are the 3 key things that I want to leave with the listeners today, because I know for me personally, it has been the 3 things that have helped me shine in my light, rightfully so, and be the woman that I am today.
Well, I love you. If you didn't, I do. Where can the listening audience follow you? Do you have a website? How can people get in touch with you to speak or get some coaching, or how can we find you?
Great. My website is currently under construction because we are on our next level, so we are getting a next level website for the marketplace. So for now, I am accessible and available through all the social media platforms with my name. You can find me on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, as Shayla Bryan, Sheila. Last name is Bryan, Bryan. And I also have a telephone number where I can be reached, and thus also on my social media platforms. But I want to be able to share it here if people are listening in. And maybe there's a lot of people who I've learned that in 2020 do not have social media, right?
Right.
So I want to be able to give my phone number out to women who may be listening that can reach me. In just a moment, I should have. It's 774-276-9506. That's the number to text me. I can also be reached via call, and I will be more than happy to speak and help anyone who may need help today.
All right. So I'll be glad when the world opens up. Florida will be a place that I plan to visit whenever we can come outside and play for real, not just maybe a couple of hours. I need to travel. I want to thank everybody for rocking with me and Sheila this afternoon. Be safe. Cover your mouth when you cough and sneeze. If you don't have to be out, don't go out. Wear a mask. The ultimate act of self-love is to stay in the house and stay safe. Join me next Saturday on Next Level with Trenace. I love you. Be authentic. And see you next week.
Amen. Good night.
Good night.